Thank you. Thank you, Maggie, for inviting me, and thank you, Lourdes, for a really fascinating talk. I'm coming from a slightly different research area. So while Lourdes is working within the field of second language acquisition and researching multilingual speakers, my work's focused predominantly on monolingual English speakers. So I've researched language variation within dialects of UK English and attitudes towards that variation, particularly in educational contexts and working with working class children. But where our research clearly overlaps is in our shared belief that language education research can and should address social justice issues, which means working towards a society in which speakers can use their language resources, be those resources associated with different languages, dialects, modes and media, in whatever way they wish to, for whatever purposes, without fear of criticism and prejudice. Now, this is an ongoing project because, as we know, language prejudice is pervasive in our society. So as Lourdes said, multilinguals frequently experience oppression, being told that their language is not good enough. Likewise, dialect speakers in the UK, whose language is seen as deviating from a perceived standard, are routinely criticised as being uneducated, unintelligent, inarticulate, slovenly even. And these attitudes permeate educational contexts too. So there is evidence that some teachers ascribe negative characteristics to non-standard speakers. And this is significant because research has shown that teachers' views about pupils can affect their instructional practices, perhaps largely unconsciously, and also the ways in which they interact with those children in the classroom. Sociolinguists have also long expressed concern that negative attitudes towards non-standard voices could have detrimental effects on children's confidence, their motivation to learn, their levels of participation in the classroom. Now, the existence of all of these negative attitudes, or potentially negative attitudes, towards language diversity in the classroom has often prompted scholars to call for awareness raising or for attitudinal change among educational practitioners, with scholars attempting to use their research to valorise speakers' diverse language repertoires. And I think this raises a number of ethical issues. I'm going to raise just three here, which will hopefully feed into our ongoing discussions, thinking about how we as researchers work with educational practitioners. So first, how do we strike the right balance between challenging teachers' assumptions and not alienating them? So in reality, teachers have often multiple and conflicting views. So I've worked with teachers who have a very strict zero tolerance policy on non-standard dialect in the classroom, but at the same time, they express concern for their pupils' well-being and sense of identity, and as part of that, value language diversity. So actually the situation is often really complex. In addition, many teachers already value diversity, but they struggle to reconcile this with institutional demands, like for primary teachers, a centralised national curriculum and the pressures from high-stakes standardised tests. Finally, and perhaps more significantly, oppressive views towards language are often, as Lourdes said, about much more than language. So as Lourdes pointed out, there are systemic structural forces stacking the deck against some groups more than others. And this means being a legitimate speaker of a language is not just about whether you can sound it, but whether you look it too. And there are links, I think, with your work and recent work on racial-linguistic ideologies by educational linguists like Jonathan Rosa and Nelson Flores, which has shown that our perceptions of language are tied to our imagining of racialised bodies, such that certain racialised bodies are associated with linguistic deficiency unrelated to any objective linguistic practices. Now, when I reflect those ideas back onto my own work with working class children in the UK, there's the possibility that working class speakers may use forms prescribed as standard, yet still be stigmatised as non-standard speakers from the perspective of the middle class listening subject. So we're faced then perhaps not just with challenging attitudes about language, but with challenging more deeply ingrained and probably largely unconscious racial and class biases. And that brings us, I think, into really sensitive ethical terrain. So that first question again then is, how do we find the right balance between challenging teachers' assumptions and implicit biases, but not alienating them or casting them as oppressive villains? Related to that, my second question is, how do we speak to teachers in ways that they're going to find useful and helpful, while also remaining committed to nuanced theoretical accounts of complex linguistic processes and ideological processes? So let's face it, teachers are unlikely to find accounts of ideological struggle particularly practically helpful in the classroom. I think what is of practical help to teachers is to use our research data, and particularly where we have video recordings of what happens in the classroom, to collaboratively reflect with them on actual examples of classroom practice with all of the inherent messiness, acknowledging the complexity of teaching and of teachers' views, and treating teachers as professionals who are continually exercising sensitivity and judgment. However, this gives rise to the third ethical issue that I wanted to put on the table, because video representations, the best video representations to reflect on and learn from, are often those in which things have gone wrong in the classroom. They're those in which the teacher has, probably unintentionally, but has positioned a student in a problematic way, where learning opportunities have been missed. And those videos may be rather embarrassing to teachers, and others may rush to judgment. That's certainly been my experience when I've done this with teachers. Other teachers rush to criticise the teacher. So if we want to use our research data, particularly video data, in knowledge exchange with educational practitioners, how can we ensure a respectful and supportive discussion of the teachers and pupils appearing in that video, but not shy away from constructive criticism of what is happening in order to learn from those representations of practice? So those are the three issues that I wanted to bring to the table, which I felt resonate with my work, which is in a slightly different area, but I think some overlap as well. Thank you very much.